All right, guys, so before we get started, I want to go over our environment. I want to go over some of the tools we'll be using, some of the text editor extensions and stuff like that, just so you can see exactly what I'm working with. And you can pick and choose what you want. Some things are mandatory, some aren't, so we'll go over everything. First of all, you're going to need Node.js. This is a MERN-Stack course. We're working with the Express framework, so we need Node, and you can get that from nodejs.org, although I'm sure most of you probably have it installed already. And you can use either the long-term support or the current version. So next you'll need a text editor. I'll be using VS Code, which is what I would recommend. However, if you want to use something like Sublime Text or Atom, that's fine too. I will be going over some of the extensions and settings that I'm using as well. And of course it's cross-platform, so it doesn't matter which OS you're on. So next is Git, which is a version control system. You will need this at the end if you want to deploy to Heroku, as we'll be doing. But I would also recommend that you create a Git repository and you make commits along the way as you progress through the course. I'll be doing this off camera. Next, you'll need Postman to make HTTP requests to our server, to our backend. Basically, we're going to create an API first, and we need a way to test it because we won't have our front end yet, our React front end. So Postman, we're going to be using that to make GET requests, POST requests, get data from the database, all that stuff. So you want to download that. Next is React Developer Tools, which is a Chrome extension. And this, I guess you don't really need this. Redux Dev Tools, I would say you need. React Dev Tools just helps you look at individual component state and props and stuff like that. We'll be using it a little bit. But the Redux Dev Tools you definitely need because this shows our entire application level state. It shows us all the actions that are fired off, and I couldn't imagine developing anything with Redux without using the Dev Tools. So those are pretty much the system-wide tools that we'll be using. So now I'm going to jump into VS Code, and we're going to take a look at some of the extensions. And there's not too many. One is this bracket pair colorizer, which of course is not mandatory. I like it because it just kind of visually organizes my blocks. So curly braces, parentheses, brackets, it'll add a color. And then if you nest inside of it another block, that'll be a different color. So it just kind of organizes things visually. Also for React and Redux, I'll be using, where is it? Quite a few extensions here. So this ES7 React Redux GraphQL React Native snippets, which is kind of a mouthful, but this gives us a bunch of shortcuts to do things like generate components, generate prop types. It allows us to write our code much faster. So I will be using this, and I'll go over some of the shortcuts as we move along. So next, let's see, I think there's one more, Prettier. So Prettier is a code formatter, and I have it set, for instance, to add semicolons if I forget one, to change double quotes to single quotes, and it will do this when I save. Now, if you want this to happen, if you want to format on save, you have to edit this setting here. So what you would do is go to Settings, and search for Format on Save, and you want to make sure that this checkbox is checked. All right, and just to show you some of my prettier settings, let's see. I have the JSX single quote checked, and I have the regular single quote checked. But of course, if you want to use double quotes, that's fine. If you don't want to use semicolons in your code, you want to uncheck this right here, the semi value. There's options for like trailing commas and stuff like that, but I keep it pretty vanilla. Now I'm going to go into my edit, my settings.json file here, which is my custom settings, and I just want to show you this right here. Okay, now if you want to be able to use, let's move that. If you want to be able to use Emmet within JSX or within React, you have to add this to your settings file. So it's this emmet.included language or included languages, and then JavaScript React. So this will allow you to be within JSX and do, for instance, H1 enter or tab, and it will create those tags for you. So I will be using that. So I would recommend adding that to your settings. And these are my other settings. A lot of it is for you guys. The font size is pushed up. Word wrap is on so the code doesn't go off the page, stuff like that. Now, one other thing I want to mention for Windows users, if you want to use Git Bash. So if you download Git and you're using Windows, there's a really nice tool called Git Bash, which is it's a terminal for Windows that's Unix based. So it's much better than using the standard Windows command line. Now, if you want that within your VS Code terminal, so in VS Code we can go to View, Terminal, or just make this a little bigger, or we can just toggle it with Control tilde or Command tilde like that. Okay, now if you want this to be Git Bash, you can add a setting in here. So if we go to, let's just search for Git Bash VS Code, and it should give us the document page right here, integrated terminal and VS Code. And if you scroll down, you'll see right here this terminal integrated shell Windows, and you can set it to the path of bash.exe, which is your Git Bash program. So if you want, you can just copy this and you can put it in here, and then you'll no longer have the standard Windows command prompt as your integrated terminal. You'll have the Git Bash. So I would suggest that for Windows users, unless you're already using something like the Windows subsystem for Linux or something like that. All right, so just wanted to mention that, but those are the tools and the settings that I'll be working with throughout the course. So if you want to install some of those extensions, or if you don't want to, that's fine too, but I just wanted to show you what I'm working with. All right, so in the next video, we're going to go ahead and set up our MongoDB database, and we're going to get started on our back end.